Okay, so we have sap green, cobalt blue, violet, magenta, permanent red, cadmium yellow, lemon yellow, and turquoise. You don't need to have the same colors, but if you have similar colors, those will work. A number 4 round brush and a number 8 round brush. You don't need the same size round brushes. As long as you have like a medium, maybe a 6 to a 10 round brush, and then a smaller brush for details. Then I have a number 12 filbert brush. All right, so tonight we are playing with zinnias, and I have a few examples of what I've been doing while preparing for tonight, just playing around. Here we have, they're in a little vase, and we have them in a vase here too. But there's a couple ideas for that. And here is just playing with the different round ball type zinnias. Then we have your cactus type zinnias. Just all kinds of zinnias. So I figured we'd do a few different types. And I'm taping down my 5" by 7" piece of paper. And let's see, I'm using my low tack tape. This one is called Kiwi Hub, I believe. I found it on Amazon. You can use any tape that doesn't pull too much on your paper. And a tip that I've heard from other artists is to, if you have a tape that does tear your paper a bit, is to put it down on the surface you're using, or on your jeans even, and pull it back up once or twice before putting it onto your paper. And that will lower the tack even more and make it so that, or help so that it won't tear up your paper when you remove it. All of you have your paper taped down. The first one I thought we would give a try is the cactus style. So we're making a puddle of the permanent rose. And we're going to mix it in with whatever yellow that you're using. You can just mix it with this bit of yellow right here. Here we go. So you have a nice puddle. So I'm going into that. I have a few little dust pieces in that yellow, but we're going to mix it in with that yellow to make a nice peach. All right, so now I'm washing the paint off my brush, and I'm going to make a little circular area on the paper that's wet, just a wet circle on the paper. And if you have a lid of a spice jar, it's about the size of a lid of a spice jar, rid of the wet area and bring it in. So you have your little petal points that are outside of the circle, and they're all going in, or you can pull them out, either pull it in or pull it out of that wet area. So we're making kind of a sun shape with our petals all around. So I'm going to wash off my brush, and you can either use your magenta or your permanent rose and just dab it in the center, dab it around a bit. It depends on how wet your paper is. So you're dabbing in your either permanent rose or your magenta into the center, and then taking just a little bit more color. So I dabbed in my permanent rose, and then I'm grabbing some magenta on the tip of my brush, and I'm dabbing in some of that magenta, so it has just a little bit of an even darker center. And then I'm washing off my brush, and while we are waiting for that to dry, we're going to start on our next zinnia. And you can make these as big or as small as you would like, but if you want to do something like one of these, if you want to put it in a little container, this container here is about 2 fingers width wide. So if you want to start your If you want, you can just practice your flowers tonight. You don't need to worry about putting them in a container at all. This is just if you want to get started on that. But I'm putting in just 2 lines, and you can fit probably 2 fingers within those 2 lines. And it's not that tall, but you don't really have to worry about that yet. I would guess it's about not quite as tall as the lid of your spice jar if you do have one handy. So just putting in a couple lines to show where it is. And I like to use a kneaded eraser to soften the lines, to soften any pencil lines. Your pencil, and it doesn't harm your paper, and it doesn't leave those little pieces of, for example, if I was erasing with this eraser, usually leaves little pieces of eraser behind. So with the kneaded eraser, it doesn't leave little pieces of eraser, and you don't need to worry about the oils of your fingers getting on your paper, moving them away. We're going to add another flower, and for this one, I'm going to use my lid of a spice jar and outline it. Here we go. And then I'm going to lighten up that pencil line with my kneaded eraser. Waiting for that one, I was thinking we would do the ball type zinnias that you see. And so for this one, we're going to start with a light wash of that permanent rose. Okay, so we're going to start kind of in the upper right-hand corner of this circle area and just make, I've heard it called maybe a C shape, but we're just going to be making lots of C shapes with white area in between, and then kind of putting a light gentle touch on the brush up towards that top, and as we get towards the base or the bottom of the circle, put more pressure on your brush so that you have bigger, longer, wider C shapes. And we're just going to fill that circle area with those C shapes. All right, and then while those colors or those C shapes are still wet, I'm going to go into my magenta. So we started with a permanent rose, and now I'm into my magenta, and I'm going into those C shapes, and I'm adding more C shapes, and also just adding some magenta to the C shapes that are already there. So just kind of making it more painterly, more loose. And we're going into some of that white area, but still leaving some white area. All right. And then while that permanent rose is still wet, I'm rinsing off my brush and going into that lemon yellow. And adding just a little bit of lemon yellow towards that top right part of the flower. So that is our first layer for that flower. We will add another layer, so we'll add more details. And our cactus style zinnia has now become a lot more dry, so we can put in another layer on that. We'll go into our puddle of lemon yellow and permanent rose. So here we go. We're going to add some more petals going in between the ones that you've already put down. Some cactus zinnias are more just straight line petals, and other ones have a more curvy look to them. Let's see, I think I did it in 2 different ways here. So in this one, the cactus zinnia petals are more straight, and then in this one, they're more curvy, so whichever way you would like to do it. There are a crazy number of different types of zinnias. I'm not sure how many there are out there, but there are quite a lot. My neighbor that lives up the street, he has so many beautiful zinnias in his garden. And this year, I usually try to have a number of varieties, but this year I only have one variety in my garden. And so when I was painting, I actually went and he allowed me to paint in his garden. Okay, so now I'm mixing that permanent rose and yellow mixture in with my magenta puddle. Excuse me. Let me grab a water real quick. Okay, so we're adding a little bit of these two, the peach in with the pink, so we have just a little bit of a darker color, and we're just adding a little bit more interest, a little more, another row of petals while it's still wet, so it kind of just flows in together, and we'll leave it at that. We'll have another layer on there for sure. So while that one is drying, let's go for our next type of zinnia. And for this one, I thought it would be fun to use a filbert brush, but if you don't have a filbert brush, you can use a medium round brush. So I'll show it with both. So for the first one, I'll use a filbert brush with, and if you have a little bit of spice jar, you can go ahead and trace it just to give yourself a circle to follow. Oftentimes when I'm trying to paint a flower, I do like to use circles just to give myself kind of be able to eyeball to see if it's looking even. Alright, so now I'm using my kneaded eraser to lighten up those pencil marks. And this is not a necessary step. You can just do it without this, but I do find it helpful. So for this one, let's see, I have an orange one done in a similar, whoops, I didn't mean to bump the camera. I have this orange one done with the filbert brush, but it can also be done with a round brush. And then I have a similar one here where it's pink, done in a similar way. And then I have a few on here that I did for practice in a similar way. And you can see that the round edge of the petal matches up with the round edge of the brush. So if you have a filbert brush, we're going into our magenta and making a puddle of magenta. Both, once with the filbert and once with the round brush. Let's see, so this type of zinnia here, if you're going to do it with a filbert brush, so you have your circle, and I'll just leave the circle here. I won't lighten it so you can really see it. And so what you'll do is you'll just go around inside the circle and you'll use your filbert brush. Okay, so I see my internet's slow. I apologize, but I see two of you are saying, oh, so most of you have a filbert brush. All right, awesome. So I might just go ahead and put it right on my other paper then. But in any case, you'll go around and use your filbert brush or your round brush if you don't have a filbert brush. And you can leave some areas of white. So I'll do it again where I show you more, leaving areas of white as well. Okay. And I am leaving a bit of white in the center. So I have a puddle, my magenta, and we're filling in the area. So if you want to leave some white for a highlight and a petal, you can take your, you can take your filbert brush and put it on its side and then kind of make the shape of the petal. So you can leave some white that way. Or you can draw, if you have a round brush, you can draw the petals and leave some white areas. But I just really like how the filbert brush is the shape of the petal pretty much. which makes it easier. But real quick, before they dry, if you've done a couple of these zinnias with your filbert brush, let's see if I can wet that back again. If it's if it's dried on you, like mine have dried on me, this is not cotton paper. This is there we go, made from pulp. Here we go. Okay, so if they dried on you, just go over the petals and wet them again. And then what we're going to do is you're going to take a smaller brush, a detail brush or a small round brush, and go into your cadmium yellow or whatever yellow, oops, I think I have some green on there. Whatever yellow that you are using. And I might have just accidentally put a little bit of green in my watercolor, but that's okay. If you do that, you can just wipe it off with a paper towel. So now I am going to dab a oval of yellow dots into my zinnia shaped flower. Okay, you can do it in the center of the flower. You can do it towards the top of the flower. Let's see, I think it might be a bit shiny, so it's hard to see. There, maybe that'll help. But you'll have an oval of yellow dots in your flower. Really nice and wet, but not too wet where it's just a huge puddle. If that happens, I would just soak it back up with a paper towel and start again. So once you get to this point, if you only have a round brush, you can go ahead and make these petal shapes with your round brush while you're waiting for me to make one with a round brush. But while that yellow is still wet, I'm going into my magenta, just right into the pan, and I'm tapping that magenta on the bottom of that top of that round, or the oval dots of yellow, and on the bottom as well, tapping it in on the bottom. There we go. So I have, well, let's see if we can, it's a little bit dark, but a lot of zinnias, they have that area of those little tiny yellow flowers. So this is representing those little tiny yellow flowers, and then that really pretty pink area that's in between, or in the center, and then that you can see on the sides. And every zinnia looks so different, so this is just the one that I happen to have growing, mainly growing in my garden this year. Okay, so you have it at the top underneath, and then at the bottom underneath. And then while that is still wet, I'm going to go into my purple. And the purple, a little tiny bit, goes a really long way, so I'm going to dab it on my paper towel a little bit, just to make sure I don't have too much of that purple. And I'm dabbing a little bit of that purple into that magenta for a little bit extra shading. As the zinnias age, this area sometimes looks longer as the petals fall away. So no matter what you do with these loose zinnias, it'll look right. Okay, so then we have that little bit of maybe white in the center, and if you don't have any white in the center, that's okay if it's all filled in. But I'm going to fill in not all of the white, but some of the white with some of that, just dabbing in a bit of that magenta. All right. Okay, so while that step for those is drying, I'm going to show making that same thing with the round brush in case you are waiting on that. Make that zinnia with the round brush as well. And here we go. And just keep practicing these. If you are in a sketchbook or you have a nice big piece of paper, you can make as many of these as you'd like, really fill it up. But what I'm doing is just making that shape of the zinnia. And this one here is done with a round brush. And then the kind of a halo of little teeny tiny flowers that they have, which we're using that yellow for. So here we go. We're going to make just a circle of petal shapes using the round brush. You can do it many different ways. You can pull down the shape and really try to make it look like the shape of a zinnia petal, which they come in so many different shapes. But here, if I pulled one off so we can look at it, but they kind of look like they have little heart shapes on the top of them. If you want it to look more exact, you can make the petals have little kind of heart shapes on the top. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat and I will try to respond as quickly as I can. There we go. So since these are just loose zinnias, I'm not being particular so much about the shape, just giving the general idea of them. And leaving some white areas where it looks like highlights, maybe a little bit of white in the center. If you have too much water, you can take your brush and kind of use the paper towel to soak up some of that water and paint off your brush, and then use your brush like a sponge to soak it back up off of your paper if you feel like you have too much on your paper. Okay, so while your zinnia is wet, then you'll go with your little brush and, oh, I'm being a little rough on my brushes. You'll take your little brush and put it in your yellow and dab it in to make either a circle or an oval. So you have an oval or a circle. Let's see, it's a little shiny. There we go. All right, so then you have your oval of yellow, and then you'll dab your small brush into your magenta and go underneath. Whoop, I may have had too much, so you can see how it's spreading quite a lot into the yellow. I had a little bit too much water on my brush, and that's okay. I'm just wiping my brush off, rinsing it and wiping it off onto the paper towel, and then picking up that red a little bit here and there where it just spread a little too much. So I'm lightening that up by using my brush as a sponge and picking it back up. And then I'm going into my magenta again. This time I'll dab it on my paper towel. Make sure I don't have too much water on there. Oh, I dabbed it a little too much. And dab it underneath the yellow. There we go. And then put a little bit in the center. All right, we're going into the purple, adding a little bit more shading. Oop, I'm going to dab it on my paper towel a bit. That purple really goes a long way. So just a little bit of purple for shading. And there's our first layer for those zinnias. All right, so back to our original painting. I'm going to put I'm sorry, just one minute. My son is asking me a question. What is it, Ben? All right, he had an internet question. I think it's It's being a little spotty upstairs. I'm painting in the basement right now, and it's a little bit better in the basement. All right, so let's see. I'm not sure if everyone has petals has practiced these, but we'll go on to another type of zinnia. And the next type of zinnia is this one here, where it's it's on its side, so we can practice some of those. All right, so for this, I also used a little bit of a spice jar just to show about how big it is. And let's see, go ahead and trace on top of the one that I've done already, so you can see what it looks like in relation to that circle. All right, if anyone's having any struggles or any questions, let me know and I'll try to help you out. So here I have the circle, the little spice jar, and then you can see how the center of the zinnia is, if this is the halfway mark, you can see how it's to the right of that halfway mark. So I have my circle, and if I draw a line down, the center of your zinnia for this type will be in the center, or about in the center, but to the right here, in the center this way, but to the right of the vertical center line. Okay, let's see. Hopefully that makes sense. I will set this here for a minute. So I'm going to lighten up my lines with my kneaded eraser. Alright, and since a lot of you have a filbert brush, I'll show you how to do this with the filbert brush. If you don't have a filbert brush, you can use a round brush. I know I'm doing quite a few types of zinnias tonight. This is our fourth type of zinnia, so if you would rather just practice one of them, that would be a good idea too. Let's see, I'm making a puddle of the magenta, and then just to give myself an idea of where I'm starting from, I'm going to put a little bit of color in this area, so it helps my eye go back to that area each time. If you can't see your pencil mark, or if you don't want to use a pencil, you could do just a dot to show you where the center of your flower will be. And then if you do want to use a pencil, you can draw in where, let's see, where your petals are going to go. So for example, they all go down to the center, and they're all curved towards the center. They're shorter on this side, and then they get longer and longer as we go. So we have our puddle of magenta, and we're going to be creating this flower here. So we'll start with the petals coming down, and the filbert brush will be on its side. We're not going to have it flat like this. It will be at an angle. So we'll bring it down all the way till it almost hits our circle, or you can go all the way and hit the circle. So that'll be one part of the petal, and then if you would like to, you can just go around all those pencil lines. And you can just start with one. Oh, I just saw a big centipede crawling towards me. Let me grab that real quick. Oh my goodness. That's what I get for painting in the basement. Okay, let's see. Okay, where was I? All right, so going down all of those pencil lines, or if you didn't work with the pencil first, just creating lines going down towards the center of your flower. We're curving this way on the top, and then as you get towards the center, making them straight, and then curving the opposite direction for the petals on this side of the flower. And then going back into my petal, and there we go. Just following those lines, and if you didn't make lines, just making shorter lines on this side, curving this way on this side, and then that way on the other side. So then to fatten up our petals a little bit, we can leave a bit of white on our petals, and we can make them more of a petal shape by putting in the second half of the petal, which you have your brush on its side again, and we're pulling it down at an angle. So we can leave a little bit of white. We can go ahead and paint inside of it if you want to, or you can leave it as white as you would like. Each petal can have a different looking highlight, so they all look a little bit different. Some of them can touch, some of them can be separate. With this type of zinnia, the ones with like the longer petals, they do tend to be more of just that single row of petals and not the double row of petals. They are probably a little bit fatter than I'm making them, but they have that similar shape to the zinnias with the little tiny petals. The shape to the very tip of the petals kind of still looks like maybe a bit of a heart, so you can add that if you would like to. But we're just making those petal shapes, and you can go over the dried part if you want to as well. We're bringing them all in, some of them touching at the bottom or in the center is fine. Here we go. So I might add one right here as well. So it looks like the petals are all kind of curved around. And there we go. So I'm using either the tip of the filbert brush or the side of it to make the tops of these petals here. And this one is going underneath that zinnia, so I'm not too worried about the top of that petal. I'm getting a notification that I have a slow connection again, so I really apologize if I lose you again. But here we have the first layer of this zinnia, and we're going to just let that dry. And while we're letting that dry, we'll go to our cactus zinnia, and we're going to be adding a little bit of green. Excuse me. So we'll take either our detail brush or a smaller round brush and make sure it's clean. We'll go into our green. There we go. Green. And what we're doing for this is just adding those fun little green areas in the center of the cactus zinnia. Some of them have it, some of them don't. There's just so many different varieties. So we're just going around the center and adding a bit of green. You can add yellow to the green, make it a bit brighter, or more water to it, make it less noticeable. We're adding a bit of green just in the center. And then we're going into our yellow. You can do lemon yellow or a darker yellow like cadmium yellow. And just putting in dots here and there. Just adding some detail, adding a little bit of fun to it. There we go. All So if you have the ball type zinnia already in your painting, we're going to be taking our larger or medium round brush and going into our magenta. Let me see if I can see if anyone has any comments or questions. All right, if you want me to go back to a particular type of zinnia, let me know and we'll go back to it. So we're taking some more of that magenta and we're just creating another layer onto our dried first layer. We're adding more color to it, more depth to it. You can see here in the example how we have that darker purple as well. So while our magenta is still wet, we'll go around the bottom and then towards the top, but not so much in that yellow area, maybe just a little tiny little bits here and there. And then we'll go into our violet while our magenta is still wet. I have some, there we go. I'm gonna dab it on my paper towel because that violet a little bit goes a long way. So you can see how dark you want it. I might want mine just a little bit darker. And we're gonna add some violet to the base of the zinnia, just to show that it's darker in the shadow and it's getting lighter towards the top. And some of them, that's the way they're colored. They're just so beautiful like that. All right, so you can go as dark as you would like. Give an example of just how dark that purple can get. All right, so you can see it gets really, really dark if you add it full strength. If you added too much, you can wipe off your brush and pick some back up. But the purple is very staining usually. Most purples are pretty staining and it is harder to pick back up once you've put it down. All right. Okay, so now that our zinnia over here is a little bit more dry, we'll take some of our cadmium yellow and we're going to make a circle of cadmium yellow all around here. It can be a circle or an oval depending on what you think looks best. And you can see how I did not lighten that pencil right underneath here. So that pencil, it will be there forever. I won't be able to get rid of it, and that's okay. But that's an example of why you do want to lighten your pencil before you go over it with watercolor. All right, so while that yellow is still wet, I rinse off my brush and dry it off a bit and go into my magenta, and I'm tapping that into the center, just right along that yellow circle right on the left-hand side. And then I'm going to put a little bit more magenta, get it a little bit more watery, but not too watery. And I'm going to tap it around the right-hand side, that yellow. And then while that magenta is still wet, I'm going into that purple and I'm going to tap that purple into that magenta here and there so that it looks like a little bit more shading, a little bit more shadow. All right, so while that is drying, I'm going to put a little bit more detail or interest into that cactus zinnia. That one's a little bit darker. This one's a little bit lighter, but I'm going to be adding just a little bit more of that kind of pink or red in the center. So you can use either magenta or the permanent rose. And we're going to be just adding it in a little bits here and there. It doesn't need to look like anything in particular. You can make it go up into some of the petals if you would like to, kind of give it a little bit more interest, or you can just use it like this one here, where I just put little dots toward the center, depending on the look that you like. Oops, there we go. All right, I think pretty happy with this. Just gives it a little bit more interest. All right, so while I'm waiting for this to dry to give it one more layer, I'm going to put in maybe an orange zinnia like this one, and I'll use my round brush, but you can use your filbert brush. So to make an orange, I'm going to use my permanent rose. All right, so I have my permanent rose, and I want to make a lot of this color, so make more. And I'm going to take some of that cadmium yellow. You can use whatever yellow you have. Make a nice orange. There we go. So now I have an orange. And if you want to, you can use the top of your spice jar to figure out where you want your next flower to go. Maybe we'll put it over here. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll put it right here. I'm tracing my spice jar. There we go. And I'm going to be making petal shapes just all around the circle. Here we go. They don't need to look like exactly like zinnia petals. They can just kind of give you the idea of a zinnia petal. And I'll leave some white here and there. Some white in the center. And this is just very loose. Every time I do it, I make it look a little bit different. Bring it out a little bit more. There we go. Okay. And then I'll show you doing it with a filbert brush as well. Let me put it right here. And this one will go a little bit behind that cactus zinnia. And oh, it is 6 after 8. So if you need to take off, I will have this recorded for you and you can watch it another time. Let's see, so I'm going to be painting kind of underneath the zinnia, which not perfectly, but that's okay. Kind of put it in there so it kind of looks like it's going behind it. And then you can leave little white here and there if you would like to. All right, and we'll let that dry. So while those are drying, we'll go back to finish the zinnia here. And we'll go back to put a little bit more of that magenta on our brush. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. I can slow down or go back to a zinnia if you have questions about it, or if you would like to watch it back and have your questions answered that way, that works too. But what I'm doing is I'm adding another layer here and there of color to the inside of the petals with my round brush. And I'm just pulling that color up towards the center, and I'm stopping at the yellow. If your yellow is not dry, it will run into your pink. So I'd wait till your yellow is dry. I'm not sure how dry my yellow is, so it might run into it just a little bit, but that's okay. Just trying to show you the next step. And I'm just putting a little bit more color to look like it has a bit more of a three-dimensional look, a little bit of shading. There we go. And then if you would like to, let's see, put a little bit more in the center. You can also add a little bit of purple if you want the shadow to be a little bit darker. You can dab some purple in your shadow and make it just a little bit darker. There we go. Let's see, these two up here are now probably dry enough where we can go ahead and do the next layer of petals. So there we go. That's more what I was looking for. Okay, so now we can, if you're using a filbert brush, you can make more petals by just making the next a little shape like this and pulling it towards the center. And you can pull your filbert brush, twist it to the side, and it will look like the petal is just looking a little bit different and giving it more of a more realistic look. There we go, put a little bit in there. Okay, so while your second layer is still wet, and you can bring out a little bit more than I did probably too. But okay, while your second layer is still wet, you can go in with your yellow and make your little yellow ring in the center. And once I'm done with this flower, I think I might need to reach a stopping point for this evening, but I will definitely continue on with this painting our next time that we do this. All right, so I'm making a circle or an oval in the center, and while that yellow is still wet, I'm going into my magenta or my either the magenta or the permanent rose. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Magenta or permanent rose. And oops, I have way too much water on my brush, so let me soak some of that back up. There we go. There we go. So we're going to be tapping in some of that magenta, or if you're using the permanent rose, towards the bottom side of that yellow, and then on the underneath of it as well. There we go. So you have that loose center where it's still kind of flowing into each other nicely. I just like that look. And then while that's wet, you can go in with a little bit of purple. And at any time your water is looking like mine, feel free to change out your water. You don't need to, but can. There we go. It is helpful. All right. We have a little too much purple. Put some magenta back on top of that. Okay. So then the one that I did with just the round brush, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm putting in, another layer of those yellow petals. And this time I'm painting in this shape. And since these are loose flowers, you don't need to worry about them looking exactly like zinnias, just kind of giving you the idea of zinnias. Okay, so now I have that second layer. And I might want to pick back up some of that paint so there's a bit of a lighter area as well. Okay. Let's see, I'm getting some of that cadmium yellow, and I'm going to be dabbing, I just realized I'm dabbing in the yellow with my larger brush. That's probably why I'm getting so much water and paint. A little too much is because I forgot to change my smaller brush. So when you're dabbing in the yellow, go ahead and change to your smaller brush. All right, there we go, that's better. And since we waited for the first layer to dry, it looks a bit different than when let's see, here's the example, than when we put it in while the first layer was still wet. Okay, so we have our oval of yellow, and we'll go into the magenta or to the permanent rose, whichever one you want to use. Sometimes those little drops that form on your brush, you can wipe them off if you're worried about them dripping down. Usually I don't have a problem with that, but all right, go. So nice and wet on wet. It's really blending in. If it's blending too much and you want more of that yellow to show, you can dry off your brush and then soak back up some of that red. All right, I'll put a little bit more in the center. Okay, get it. And then another time I'll give a more detailed tutorial of the vase. So the vase, if you want to put a vase in for your painting, here are two examples. Here's a small vase and a larger vase. I'm just using the colors that are in the painting and then also the colors of the background. So this one you can see more of the violets and the greens and the yellow, and this one is just the blue and the green. It's more of a simple version, but I think either one work. So to start, I would go into your cobalt blue. And just go down your pencil lines. If you didn't see me, what I did earlier is I took my 2 fingers and just took a pencil, and that's about how thick my vase is. So I just put 2 pencil lines and then I lightened them with an eraser. So I'm just going over those pencil lines, and then I'm going to be giving it some back and forth swooshes, just like this, just kind of swooshing back and forth a bit. And then you also have stems which go up and down. So I'm going to go into my sap green, and while that blue is still wet, put in some stems so it gives that nice wet on wet look. And we'll be going over this again as well, so they'll look a little more blended. And you can leave some white areas to look like highlights on the glass. And then towards the top of your mason jar or your glass vase, I was using mason jar, so I had these little lines towards the top. But if you just want to make it look like a glass vase, you can just kind of keep it more just general shadows of blue and kind of the wet on wet flowy green of the stems, and lighten it up. There we go. So you're just giving the idea of a vase or a mason jar. We're not trying to really draw it realistically. We're just giving the idea of highlights and glass and water. There we go. So just kind of back and forth swooshes, very watered down blue and some watered down green lines going through it. And there you have a vase or a mason jar. And add another flower to our little bouquet of flowers that we started last night. And I'm going to outline where I would like it to go using my little bit spice jar just to give myself the idea of where it will be in the composition. Let's see. There we go. So it will be behind the cactus zinnia that's right here. So I'll be putting it behind right there. And I'm going to go into the magenta. There we go. And just like with these practice zinnias, I'll be doing just that, like a ring of petals all the way around. All right, and since this is underneath that zinnia, I'm going to start about here. I'm just going to be painting underneath or in between some of those petals at first. Just kind of carefully going around them so it looks like this flower is underneath it, and then continuing on with my petals all the way around. And here we'll be going behind this flower, and I have a little bit of a pencil line to erase. So I'm going to take my kneaded eraser, and another thing I really love about them is you can pinch them into whatever shape that you want to get into little tiny areas. So if you have a little area like this where you have pencil that you don't want to paint over, because once you paint over your pencil you can't erase it anymore, it's there permanently. So I'm going to go over that area and just paint around those petals and in between some of these petals to make it look like the flower is going underneath or behind this cactus zinnia. And I'm using my filbert brush on its side so I can get in between those petals and paint around them. I really do like the filbert brush, as you can have it flat and make wider marks, and have it on its side and make the really thin marks. So my petals have dried up a bit, so I'm going to go back into my puddle of magenta, and I'm going to go over these petals that have dried up a bit, which it might make them just a little bit darker, and that's okay too. Alright, so I've gone over the petals, and you can leave white here and there in the petals or in the center. Just in the end, it makes it look like there are some highlights on your flowers. I might go in to the cactus zinnia just a little bit more as well. Alright, so while that pink or that magenta is still wet, I am going to go into my cadmium yellow and make my ring of yellow. So here are one of the practice zinnias. So we're making that little circle or oval of yellow. And let's see. I think that's pretty good there. And it's still wet, so it's giving you that loose look where it's drying, or not drying, it's blending wet on wet into the paint that's still wet on your paper. So it forces you to be looser and not look at those tiny details, just giving you the idea of that flower and not exactly what that flower looks like. Okay, so now I'm rinsing out the yellow and going back into my magenta. And while that yellow is still wet, dabbing in towards the bottom, and then underneath that oval, dabbing in some magenta. You can dab it in straight from the pan as well. You can see how much darker it is when I dip my brush right into the pan instead of into that little puddle. It's a lot thicker paint, so it's much darker, and it really stands out more. I can go right in there, maybe a little bit in the center as well. We're gonna either let that dry just like that or go into your purple and add even more shading with the purple. I'm gonna dab it on the paper towel a bit just because that little bit of purple really does go a long way. I might pick some of that back up as well. But purples usually, they're highly staining and usually highly pigmented. They leave a lot of color behind. So if you think that you want your yellow to be a bit brighter, if the red has gone into it a bit more, you can dry off your paintbrush on your paper towel. Make sure you wash all that purple off of it, then dry it off, and then pick some of that color back up off of your paper. You're using your brush like a sponge, and you can lighten that area a bit if you would like to. It's harder to do with the purple, it really is staining, but if it's the magenta that's going into your yellow, it's easier to pick that back up. And then you can wait for it to dry to add more yellow on top, or you can just go in right away and add more yellow and kind of see how it blends together. I'm back at work teaching, so my voice is a bit froggy. I've been talking all day. All right, so there we go, adding some more yellow back into there. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll grab some water real quick. Excuse me. All right, so we have a little bit of shading in that zinnia. And what next? So now, while that dries, I think I might go ahead and put a flower in on the other side. And I'm trying to decide what color I would like it to be and what shape. I might demonstrate a zinnia side shape of it. Let's see, I'll erase this pencil. I did go a little bit dark just so that it would show up really well on camera, so I'm not sure how well it's going to erase from the paper. You definitely want to draw it in pencil as lightly as you can while still being able to see it when you draw it in your, or when you draw on your watercolor paper. So we'll go ahead and erase these. That way we'll be ready to put in the background and some stems, maybe some leaves. To move this pretty zinnia out of the way. There we go. So I'm rubbing this kneaded eraser on the paper just like a regular eraser. When you're picking, or when you're lightening the pencil, I dab it like this so that it lightens it, but it stays on the paper. But when I want to erase it, I do rub it on the paper just like a regular eraser. And I also use a regular eraser on watercolor paper if the kneaded eraser is not doing the job of picking it all the way back up. Alright, so this one is still a little bit wet. Probably don't want to get my eraser in it, so I'll wait before I erase that one anymore. And let's see. Now I have a couple of examples. Let's see, here I have this little one. I might do something like that here on the side, or maybe at the top. And I have another example here, more of a thicker, fatter bunch. I'll go ahead and just mark the area of where I want the flower to go. Just helps me with my composition. And trying to decide what color. I don't know if any of you have an opinion as to what color zinnia that I should put in there. I also picked this fun, it almost doesn't look like a zinnia. It's the cutest little zinnia that he had in his garden. And it's just this orangey, yellowy little flower. I might try something like this there. Set that down. Okay, so if I want to do something like that one, I would, let's see, I would get a yellow, which I think this cadmium yellow will do, with maybe a little bit of the permanent rose, just a touch of the permanent rose, or maybe some of this peach that I made yesterday. Again, I love watercolors because you can reuse the paint that is dried on your palette. If you want to reuse it from one day to the next, I suggest covering it with maybe parchment paper so it doesn't get dusty. Or if you're like myself and you have a large fluffy dog, so it doesn't get any dog hair in it. But otherwise, it's just, you can just use it, no problem. Just re-wet it and it's ready to go. All right, so I think I will put something like that little orangey yellow one in, and I'll just use my filbert brush, and I'm using it on its side. I'm pressing down and then picking up the pressure as I get towards the center. So I'm pressing down and then picking up the pressure. And here we'll have it look like it's going underneath that petal, so it's a little bit trickier. We'll make it look like it's going underneath that one as well. Now we just have to kind of pretend that they're underneath. And let's see, I think it would probably be a little bit longer here. Just to give you the idea or the suggestion of a flower being underneath there. We don't have to draw all the little details in perfectly. Just enough where it looks like there might be petals going underneath the flowers that are already there. All right, and if you paint on top where you don't want to, you can take a dry paper towel and you can use it to pick that paint back up to fix your mistake. And then you probably want to let the area dry longer than I am to repaint where you want it to go. But so now I have that suggestion of that zinnia, and I'll get a little bit more of the yellow on my paintbrush and a little bit more of that peach and make just a little bit darker of a orangey yellow color. There we go. And while it's still a little bit wet, I'm just going to add a little bit of interest to the petals here and there, a little bit of shading, because they are very small petals. It's a very small flower, and I'm going to add just another petal here and there. Make it a little bit fuller. Here we go, look like it's going underneath these flowers. All right, and while it's still a little bit damp, I'm going to go in with my detail brush and put in a bit of green. There we go. So I don't know if you can really see on this camera, but there's just a little bit of green in the center and a little bit of shading. So I'm going to start with the green. I have a little bit of that sap green on my brush, and I'm going to make just like a half circle, sap green, just to give it a little interest, a little extra color. There we go. And then I'm going into my permanent rose, putting a little bit of that on my brush. Let's see, I think that will work. Just a little bit more. And I'm dabbing that in, another kind of like a half circle right into that green. So So it kind of turns into more of a, not quite a brown, but the red and the green together where they do blend in can make a bit of a brown. And then I'm dabbing just a few little dabs here and there just to give that little flower a bit of a center. All right, so now our bouquet is starting to fill out a bit more, and I'm going to add a few more petals to this zinnia here. Now that it's dry, I'm going to take my filbert brush, rinse it off, go into my puddle of magenta, and make just a few little petals here and there to give it a little bit more of a three-dimensional look. And you can do it on its side. You can pull up or push down, either way. There we go. Just to give it a little bit more dimension. All right. And you don't want to be too picky about it, just because these are loose flowers. They don't look exactly like zinnias, so you can be a little bit more free about it. Let's see, I think I will add maybe some leaves or some stems at this point. Maybe I'll put one more zinnia up here, maybe a zinnia that is not quite fully bloomed. Let me think about this. Or maybe the side profile of one. All right, let's see. I'm looking at old examples and seeing what I want to do. Maybe something like this, maybe like that light pink one there. I might try for something like that. Or here's another one where it's kind of, you can see the side view of the zinnia. All right. So for that, I think I will make, let's see, a little bit of that permanent rose mixed in with a little bit of the magenta, just a light pinky wash. And with the filbert brush, I'm going to be making petals side to side. So it kind of looks like the zinnia is, you're seeing it from the side, you're not seeing any of the petals really straight on. So these ones are going to be shorter. Here we go. And then on the side they'll come up more. Something like that. All right, I think I like that. There we go. Okay. Then while that's wet, I'll go ahead and put in a little bit of that fun interior part. And let's see, I might have one that looks like it. So kind of like you're painting it on its side. Maybe I can set this down here. Yeah, there you go. So you'll have a little bit of that yellow, those little tiny yellow flowers peeking out of the top. And where you touch them to your still wet paint, it will bleed in and it'll have that really pretty wet on wet look. If you like that, or you can wait and add this after this is dry so that they won't bleed in together. And then I think I'll also add a little bit of that magenta towards the top. Maybe if I scooch this down, you can see a little better. There we go. interest. And then you can always do one more layer as well once it's dry. All right, so now to add a few stems, I'm going to be using the sap green. And I can mix it right into this area. You don't need to mix it into an orange, but I just happen to have a little bit of that orange there. So I'm going to put my little sap green puddle there mixed into the orange or the yellow, as that will tone the green down just a little bit from being, or at least the orange will, so it looks more of an olivey green, maybe more of a natural stem color. Although the zinnia stems, they are pretty bright green. You could just do straight sap green if you would like to. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if I want the stem all the way down or if I want to make it look like there's some more flowers in the background. I might just go ahead and put the stem in. I think that would be a fun look. Well, let's try it out and see. So we have the stem coming down and it would go right into that cactus flower. So I made it really thin at first, and then I'll go ahead and press a little bit more on my brush, make it a little bit thicker, take some of that paint off. Here we go. Now if you want to, you can put in this part of the flower where it's that green that comes down. That could be fun to add here as well. If you want to do that, you can just add little bits of green on either side, make it look like, I'm not sure the botanical name of that part, but make it look like it's coming down. I would wait until your petals are dry to do this. Mine, it's not wet enough where it's soaking up into the petals, but I did paint on top of the petals just a little bit on accident, so I'm using my paper towel like a sponge and picking a little bit of that back up. With most colors, you can pick a bit of them back up with a paper towel or with a dry brush if you do not like what you have done, which I really do enjoy with what that watercolor allows you to do that. But some colors, for example, black and purple, it is really hard to pick it back up once you put it down. All right, so we have a little bit of green for a stem, and maybe I want a hint of a little bit of a leaf there. I'm not sure. Then we'll have a stem coming up here for this zinnia, or you can add more flowers to make it kind of hide the stems and make it look like just a really full flower arrangement. And before I move on from that stem, I forgot to put in just a little bit of blue for a little bit of shading. You can use blue or a darker green. You can mix in your blue with your green to make it a little bit darker, just however you want to do that. And I usually also like to add a little bit of yellow in my stems, just in the highlights, just for fun. Definitely not something you need to do, but I like to add a little bit of yellow in my stems as well. Here we go. So now there's not just all that one color green, you have a little bit of blue, a little bit of yellow, and then a little bit of blue again. This is looking a little funky, but that's okay. We'll just leave it there for now. All right, so my camera is at a bit of an angle, which I'm not sure how well you can see this, but hopefully it's okay. And I'll move this out of the way. I might go ahead and put a couple little leaves in here. And I'm just using my small number 4 brush for these leaves. And with zinnia leaves, there's usually 2. They come off of the flower, one on each side of the stem. And I'm leaving just a little bit of white so it looks like a little bit of highlight. And I might dab in a little bit of blue on the leaves as well. Go. Alright, so my little leaf. And then just so we don't go over time, I went a little bit over time last time, I'm going to go ahead and erase these pencil marks so I can show you how to put a background in case you're here just for that part. I'm going to get started on that because I know there are a lot of people who already painted their zinnias yesterday and are just waiting to put in the vase and the background. So I did go over the vase kind of really quickly at the end of the video yesterday, and all I did for the vase, oh, I have a little more pencil. When you draw pencil on top of watercolor, you can still erase it. It's only when you watercolor on top of the pencil that you can no longer erase it. Okay, so for the vase, it's just about 2 fingers wide, and I just drew 2 little straight lines, and then with a brush, I might have used a round brush. I had a puddle of cobalt blue, and I just swished it back and forth and went down the sides with it. And then I took a puddle of the sap green, and I put in a few little lines of that sap green, and that's how I did that little vase there. And it's just a loose watercolor vase, just kind of gives you the hint of a vase or the idea of a vase or a mason jar, but you can get as detailed with that as you would like. And you can make it wider as well. One of the artists painting last night, she painted an entire mason jar, which is beautiful. So whatever you would like to do for that. And then once all of your flowers and your vase is completely dry, you'll want to change out your water. So right now my water is this lovely peach color. So you want to get new water. I'm going to do that real quick. I have my sink is right here if you can hear me. Okay, so I've changed out my water. So now I have clean water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around all of these flowers, and I'm not going to touch them, but I'm going to go around, and you can use a bigger brush. I'm painting in my basement. I usually paint upstairs in my sunroom, my little studio upstairs. So I don't have my larger brush with me, but if you have maybe a pointed cat's tongue larger brush or a pointed oval wash brush, something where you still have control, you still have a point to it, but it's bigger. Maybe a larger round brush, you can use that. And I'm leaving a little bit of dry area around each petal, each flower. I'm not touching what I've already painted. I'm just going around it and I'm just wetting it down. All right, so wetting all the area. And if you have too much of a puddle and you feel like you can't control it, you can dab some of that water off onto your paper towel and go back into it, and it kind of picks it back up like a sponge a bit. That way you can control your water a little bit better on your paper. If you're just sloshing around a large petal, it's much more difficult to control. Part of this is also moving kind of quickly, and I'm going to stop here, I think. Well, maybe I'll keep going. It's not too much water or too much paper. If you have a really large piece of paper, you can do one section at a time. Maybe I'll demonstrate that here. I might as well. So I'm getting just this half of the paper wet around the flowers, and I'm going to be making a wash. I should have made this wash first actually, but I'll be making a wash of turquoise. So I have my turquoise, and I'm going to be using this little dish here. You can make your wash on a flat, like a plate, but I do like using these palettes with the little areas to make washes in them, as you can make a lot of a wash at one time and it won't dry out on you as quickly. I normally don't do it right on top of my painting. You want to do this away from your painting so you don't splash onto it. But I'm filling up this little area maybe a third of the way with water, and then I am using my turquoise. You can use whatever blue that you would like for this, and I'm making a lot of wash all at one time so that I have enough for my entire background. I'm not sure if I'll need all of this, but it's good to make more than you think that you will need. So I'm making my wash, and I'll go ahead and test it out. So see if that's a little too light still. I want my wash to be darker than that. So I'm going to add more of this pigment, more of this paint to my wash. And this turquoise the paint is a little bit heavy, so the pigments, they sink down to the very bottom of my puddle. So while I paint, I'll have to keep going back and stirring it up a bit, as those pigments like to settle down to the bottom. There we go. I think that's better. I think that's more of what I want. Maybe just a little bit more turquoise in there. So once you have the color of wash that you want, then it's the time to go around and get all your white paper wet with your brush. I did do that backwards, but so it's all damp. It's not puddles of water, but it's damp, and so you can see how that wash is flowing out into that damp paper. And I'm leaving just a little bit of white around my flowers and around my vase, and if it touches here and there, that's fine too, but I'm leaving just a little bit of white. And I'm going to keep stirring my wash as I go, as that paint does like to settle to the bottom of the dish, as those pigments these ones especially are a bit heavier for this cobalt turquoise that I'm using. And I'm just going around on top of that damp paper that we've already gotten wet. My phone keeps telling me that I have a slow internet connection, so I hope that you can hear me okay. If not, I will post this again. I'll put all 3 of the videos together so that you can watch them without all the internet interruptions. So I'm just going over those areas that I've already gotten damp, and you can see how the paint is flowing into those damp areas. And I'm leaving just a little bit of white around my petals. You can go right up to them and touch them if you would like. This is just the look that I'm going for. So you want to use a brush with a point on it so that you can control where you are putting this wash when you get right up close around those petals. Ooh. So I touched the tip of that one right there. And that's okay. You can go right up against the flowers and the petals in some places if you would like to, or just keep a little bit of white around like I am. And no reason other than I like the look of it. You can go right up against the petals as well. And I can do that here just to show you what that would look like. So you can go right up against the petals as well. You don't need to leave a little bit of white. Or you can leave a little bit of white like I am, just for fun, just for the look of it. Okay, so I have some damp paper here. And if you're doing your paper just little by little, you want to make sure to keep the edge wet. So you want to, if this is damp or wet paint here, I'm going to scooch this up a little bit. You want to make sure that you keep it wet if you're adding color to it, so you don't get a line when you're creating a large wash area. So I'm going to continue on with this, and I'm going to wet this new area. And this paint here is still damp, this is still wet here. And I'm just getting the paper wet, not big puddles of water, just wet enough where you can see the shine on the surface, but not too wet where you can't really control. You know, let's, for example, if I had large puddles of water like that, it would just be too much. So if that happens, just soak it back up with your brush, dry it off on your paper towel, and then move that water around so you don't have big puddles here and there. So I'm dampening all this area and in between. And here I can stop because this section here is cut off from this section, so I don't have to do that all at once. I can do that separately. But this here, it is connected, so I'm going to go ahead and dampen this as well. There we go. So this whole area is all damp, and I'm going to bring the water down to this area as well, around the corner, even though I might not get to that just yet, because you want to keep the paper wet where you're not going to be able to get to it just yet, but you want to keep it wet so that it all flows together, so you don't have lines of where one area is dry and the other area is not dry. All right, so I'm adding more of that wash and just kind of dabbing it around these flowers. There we go. And so this area is still damp, it's still wet, so when I bring the wash from this area over to it, it does, at least it should be wet enough where it will just kind of have that soft wet on wet blending effect. And I'm gonna dab this in here as well. And I do like the look of leaving just a little bit of white around those petals just for fun, for this really loose look. But you can go right up to the petals if you would like to. And you can see how I accidentally got some blue on that petal. Let's see if I can pick it back up or if it's too late. I'll try to pick it back up with my paper towel. And yep, I picked it right back up. So I'm happy about that. And normally I would let it dry first before going back over that area, but I'm not being too particular with this. All right, so I'm stirring my wash because those pigments do like to sink down towards the bottom. And I almost forgot about this little area here. So since I've already gone over it with water, I can just kind of dab my brush in there and it'll kind of flow into those areas that I've already gotten wet without having to be too particular about it. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to go up to these petals as well. Here we go. One area is getting too dark and it doesn't look like the wash of another area. You can always dry off your brush and pick back up some of that color, or you can add more color if it doesn't come back up to the area that is looking lighter. I'm just going to keep going. Oops, I think I've reached the end of my damp area, so I need to get ahead of myself and wet this area here so I don't have a drying line here. If this paper is dry and I'm painting onto the dry area without having wet it first, if I take a little bit too long and let this dry, it'll leave a drying line, which I don't want to do. So you don't want puddles. I'm going to soak that back up just a little bit, but you do want it wet enough to be shiny. Let's see. So I'm going to wet this whole area, everything that I'm going to be painting in the blue. I'm trying not to be too precious about it, as this is a looser painting, and just kind of go quickly around the petals, leaving a little area of dry paper or white dry paper around them. And some areas they can be touching the petals and some areas not, that's fine. Or if you want to just go right up to them, that works as well. Okay, so all that paper is wet. Now that I've dampened all this area, I can go back in with the wash, stirring it up again because those pigments like to rest on the bottom of the ceramic dish. And I'm just going to dab that paint in this area and let it flow into that already wet area that I painted around the petals. And then I'll go in and tighten it up a bit after I put in more of just this loose painting. There we go. Kind of dabbing it around those petals. Alright, so now that I've dabbed it in, I'm going to dry off my brush just a little bit so I can control it a bit more around the petals. I might have dried it off a little too much. Okay, put a little more paint back on the brush. To go just around those petals, just kind of get it a little bit closer and smooth out the background just a little bit more. I am using my pinky as a kickstand. I tend to do that a lot to try to make my strokes just a little bit smoother sometimes, to give my hand a little bit of support. There we go. Alright, so it's not perfect, but it's fun, it's loose, it's bright colors of the, whoops, I just painted on my petal. The bright colors of the end of summer. Let's see if I can pick that back up. Yep, it picked right back up. If you make a mistake, the sooner you try to pick it back up with your little bit of paper towel or your brush, the better. And I'm trying to move quickly because if I let this dry, then every stroke will show and it won't look like a smooth background. So I'm trying to do this quickly. If that does happen, you can go over all of it again with another layer, and that really does hide a lot of those drying lines if you accidentally get some of them there. Okay, I think I just want to pull them in a little bit here too. Alright, I think that's pretty good. And this is just the first layer. We'll let this dry and then we'll put another layer on top of it, and we'll get these little areas as well. Alright, so while the background is drying, if anyone missed the way that I painted in the vase, I'll go ahead and go over that again so that you can see me paint it in. And then I can also darken what we have just because it's so late now compared to that fun background. Let's see, so I'm getting some cobalt blue on my brush. And I do like that light watery effect, but I also want a little bit more of a darker area in the space area so that it shows up more now next to that darker background that I've put in. So all I'm doing is I'm going kind of back and forth, swishes with lots of water and a little bit of blue on my brush, leaving some dry water paper for the highlights. Bring that blue up a little bit more. And then while that is still wet, I'm going into the sap green and pulling down sap green stems. Go. Alright, just to make it a little bit darker. There we go. Right now we have blues and greens, and then if you would like to, you can add a little bit more color into the water, just kind of little reflections of the flowers that are up here in the painting, just bringing a little bit of that color down into the vase. Usually when you have something in glass with water in it, it does usually have some of that color reflected into the water. And then there's also this question of what to do with that white paper in the center. And I handled it a couple different ways in these two paintings. In this painting, I added first green and then some violet to deepen it so that it looks like there's shadow, maybe like a fuller bouquet that has flowers that you can't quite see, and stems and leaves in there, so just kind of a shadowy dark area. And then in this composition, I painted some magenta and some permanent rose and yellow in there so that it looks like there's another flower in the bouquet kind of peeking up from underneath those other flowers. So either way, I think worked pretty well. Or you can just do the background color. You don't need to do either way. We can start off with the background color and then you can see what that would look like. I do need to go ahead and put it into that white area there. So I'm going to go ahead with just water first and paint in that area first with just water. Another reason I like to use just water first, brush up into a flower, and I can let it dry completely and then try it again. And this way, I put in the water first. I'm going to stir up my turquoise, and I'm going to just drop in that, tapping it in to that already wet area. Kind of carefully painting in between petals. There we go. And if you want to, you can go right up to the petals. You don't need to leave a little white space. Okay, so now I'm going with just water on my brush, and I'm going to wet this area as well. Just go in between the petals and around the petals. There we go. All right, then I'm going to dab that turquoise into that wet area, and I think I might have just a little bit too much water, but that's okay. It's still working. I can just soak some of that back up if I need to. There we go. Okay. It looks a little bit too light, so I'm going to stir up my turquoise again and dab in some more of that turquoise to darken the area up so that it matches the other area better. All right. I painted right on top of that petal, so I'm going to let that dry and then redo that area. A little bit of turquoise right in here. Maybe I won't let it dry. Maybe I'll just dab it right back in. There we go. I don't think it's too wet, so I don't think it'll be a problem. Yeah, if it was too wet, it would just kind of run right back into the area that you picked it back up from. So I think that works. It might be a little bit dark, so I might soak some of that back up, but I think that looks pretty good. Maybe just a little bit right here. All right, so now I think we have covered our whole background, and I'm going to put it in between these flowers here too, just so you can see what that looks like. And then we might go ahead and darken it, put some shadow in this area, or maybe make it look like there's a more of like a purpley zinnia that's under there. We'll see what it needs, what it looks like when we get there. And in this part, I didn't put water down first, as I'm going to be making it darker than the other areas. I'm not going to leave it just the turquoise, so I'm not too worried about it looking the same. Here we go. Okay, so this is what it would look like with just turquoise if you wanted to try that out. And I'll go ahead and put it in. There we go. Okay, so that does look pretty. Then if you wanted to, when this dries, you can put a green stem in if you would like. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for more of this look with more of a darker green area, or maybe make it look like there's a purple zinnia in there. So let's see. I think I'll try the purple zinnia first, and then if I don't like it, I'll go for more of that green. So if we're going to pretend like there's a kind of a purple zinnia hiding under here, kind of underneath all these flowers, put purple around. There we go. And then we'll add some texture to it so it doesn't look like it's just a purple blob. Here we go. And if I don't like it looking like a purple zinnia underneath there, then I can add green to the purple and make it look like it's more of just leaves and the stem that's under there. All right. Well, not sure. I think I like it okay. All right, and so now I'm going to go for that darker. So that was the magenta that I just added, but on top of the turquoise, it looks a bit darker. And then I'm going to add some of that purple to give it some texture. So adding in purple here and there as if it is a three-dimensional flower that's behind or underneath these flowers. Just little dabs here and there. Okay, so I think that kind of looks like there's a flower behind there. All right, so our background is dry enough to put another layer. And I wanted to show you how I did this background here. So you can see it has one layer of turquoise, and then I've added some yellow and some cobalt blue, or actually this might be just another layer of turquoise now that I think about it. This one is just the turquoise that I did a little bit darker than this one. There's many things that you can do for the background. Let's see, Sherry, I'm just seeing your question. I apologize. You asked it 41 minutes ago, I think. You asked, what size is your filbert and is it a velvet touch? So this filbert brush is a size 12, and I apologize. My internet connection just was terrible earlier, but it's a size 12. It's not a velvet touch. It's just Master's Touch from, is it Hobby Lobby or Michael's that has Master's Touch? But it's just a Master's Touch filbert from either Hobby Lobby or Michael's. But I really do like the Velvet Touch series though. All right, so if anyone's interested in this really brightly colored background, what I did for this is I used a wash of this lemon yellow, and I would make your wash far away from your painting. And you can see I have a little bit of pink on my brush, but I would make your washes far away from your painting, not right next to it. I'm just doing it this close for the video. But I'm filling up this. Oh, I have more red on my brush than I thought. Well, I'll have just a little bit of a pink glow to it maybe, but I'm filling up this a little bit, little puddle in there with some lemon yellow wash. There we go. The more water you have, the lighter it is, and the less water you have, the thicker the paint, the brighter or darker it is. Just depends on the look that you're going for. There we go. And all you do is once your first layer is dry, you just paint right on top of it with your next layer of paint. And you want to do this pretty quickly. You can go with just water on top first if you'd like. Or you can go right in with the wash. Either way. But you can see the turquoise wash, there's a lot of texture to it, so this is kind of fun to see the areas where you can see more of the yellow or more of the blue and that fun textured background. Here we go. And then you come all the way into the petals. And I'm not being too particular or too perfect about it. Here we go. Stir up my yellow a bit. Sometimes once you put the background in, then you want to change some of the colors in the stems or the leaves. This is still nice and wet, so I'm going to come down about halfway on both sides. And then I'll start in with another layer of that turquoise to meet up with this yellow while it's still damp. There we go. So you don't want to use too much water while you do this because you want to be able to control it a bit. But I have a lot of fun with the bright colors, so I enjoy doing that. Just layering watercolors is so much fun. All right, so now that we've come down to maybe a little bit over halfway, I'm going to go into that turquoise again and stir that up. And then starting from the bottom, or you can start from where that yellow is still wet. You don't want that yellow to dry out, so you might want to start from where the yellow is still wet and just dab in that turquoise so it blends wet on wet smoothly together. And then, let's see, we'll go to the other side. And I will stitch these 3 videos together. So if you need to get going, you can go ahead and I will repost them. So I'll start over here where it's still wet. See, I have my phone in my way videotaping, so my arm's kind of curled around the painting. But I'm dabbing that turquoise into the yellow, so it's blending up nicely, wet on wet, a nice smooth blend. Going around the petals. And wherever I go with this, it'll be a darker hue of that, or darker shade of that turquoise. And then if you would like to, you can add another blue as well. You could add maybe an ultramarine blue to the very bottom, so it has like an ombre effect. That would look really pretty as well. Here we go. Just wherever I put that turquoise, going back on top of it with the second layer. Oops, painted over that one a little bit, but that's okay. All right. There we go. So you can stop there, or if you're feeling adventurous, maybe you want to add in, see, maybe an ultramarine blue. Not sure if this is my ultramarine blue, but you can go even darker down at the bottom. You can add in a little more color if you want to. If it's still wet, this is a little bit dry, but it's still damp, so it's still allowing me to add a little bit of a darker color and drying pretty smoothly. Do it to the other side. Here we go. But you can have fun with this and add as much or as little color background as you would like. And it's drying a bit, so I'm going back into my turquoise and just adding a little bit more of that wet turquoise. Oops. And reminding myself not to be too precious or too particular. All right. Well, I think that's where I'll stop with this. If you would like to share your paintings, if you play around with this and have fun, I love seeing your paintings, so please do share if you give this a try. And thank you so much to those of you that have already shared your paintings with me. I really enjoy seeing them. Let's see if I can scooch this down a little bit more. There we go. So maybe you can see all of it. And then if you want to add more layers to any of these flowers, more layers, just the more interesting your painting gets, or sometimes the more overworked maybe it looks. But sometimes it's hard to know where to stop. But just try to loosen up a bit, have some fun. I really do like painting loose florals just to kind of relax and not think about anything other than the flowers that you're painting for a little bit. Oh, let's see, Lisa asks, will we be able to find the final composite video on YouTube? Yes, I will post this on YouTube, and I'll also post it here on Facebook. Let's see, Sherry says, thank you for doing this, love your painting. Thank you so much, Sherry. I really appreciate you being here with me as well. I just love painting in a group, or even if you're not painting and just watching, just that kind of companionship, even online. I just really enjoy that. Kind of like having a book club, but a painting club. All right, well, I will compile the 3 videos together, stitch them together, and hopefully I've seen everyone's comments. Let me refresh it real quick. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you being here. And I hope to have this edited and up this weekend. I'm back to teaching, so my days are a little bit fuller with school starting again, or school started again. But I have my weekend free, and I hope everyone enjoys their hopefully long 3-day weekend with family or friends, or just being outside and hopefully beautiful weather. I hope you all have a lovely long 3-day weekend, and I will post this on Facebook and on YouTube, and I'm excited to paint with you again next time. Have a good night. So for those of you who were watching the live tutorial for this, I had not let it dry yet to take the tape off, so I'll go ahead and do that. I think it's pretty dry. And to remove the tape, you want to pull up and away from your paper so that you minimize the risk of tearing your paper. So instead of pulling this way where you'd pull into it, you pull this way so you're pulling away from your paper. So if you do tear, it just tears towards you, that little bit of white, and it doesn't tear into your beautiful painting. And go nice and slow. There have been times where I have unfortunately torn the paper, but thankfully with the tape that I have been using lately, the low tack tape, I have not been tearing my paper, so knock on wood, I won't tear it again. But here it is with a little bit of that white border, which always makes it look so nice and neat. And the painting is finished. And here we have some of my neighbors' gorgeous zinnias that I'm so grateful for that he let me go in and pick today. Let me know if you try it out for yourself, and I would love to see your work. That's one of my favorite things about posting tutorials, is seeing your work. So please do share with me if you give it a try, and I will see you next time.